Welcome to Startup Hacks, a We Global podcast. We explore the stories and secret strategies that women entrepreneurs use to save time and money when bootstrapping and building their businesses. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. Welcome back to another episode of Startup Hacks. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina, and today I am excited to welcome NICOLA Stephenson. NICOLA is one of the co-founders of oHHo, a cannabis wellness brand where she leads all marketing and partnership initiatives for the business. NICOLA is also the founder of Free, which works with clients in medtech, the hospitality space, and the women's movement. In 2018, she founded a nonprofit called It's a Thing that raises awareness and money for head and neck cancer. NICOLA, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Oh, my pleasure. Really great to be here chatting to you today.
Thank you. So I'm so excited to have this discussion with you because I love what you're doing and such an interesting story. But before we begin, I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of context and paint a little bit of the background of from which you come, where you were raised, how you got started in your professional journey.
Of course. So I grew up in a small town in the north of England, and my parents didn't marry. I was a product of their wild affair, which is really a whole book for another time, or that's a gin and tonic when we get the chance. And so, but normal is just your normal, right? So I think up until the age of sort of 6 or 7, my, environment was just my environment. I adore, both of my parents. And, as you get a little bit older, people make decisions that are right for them, and not to dwell too much on that. But my mum came from a very, humble background. My dad came from a very working class background in Liverpool, one of 7 children. He grew up, with no money, and used to tell us, stories of not having glass in the windows, and to which we would all get out our tiny violins, as you can imagine. And he really was completely self-made. He was not stupid, he was sharp, he was streetwise, and he was a serial entrepreneur. So my childhood was, one day we were packing up posters for computer games, and the next day we were sending out brochures for a kitchen business. And some days there were money, some days there wasn't any money, some days we could pay the school fees, some days we couldn't. And but it was a great a great experience, and just how I so working for someone was sort of a very strange concept for me, as you can imagine. My father had this just flexibility of really doing whatever he wanted. So I studied at school, went to college, studied journalism, and then I moved to London. And my tutor said, "You'll never get a job in journalism, you're not tough enough." And so I ended up in the communications field, and I started there. And after a couple of years, at that time, the industry was very segmented into really direct marketing, but through the mail, no social media, PR, communications, corporate communications, and then advertising, which was the holy grail of everything. And it was a very exciting time, because as I entered the industry in sort of early 2000s, YouTube had just been invented, and all of these new blogging was a thing. And so I went out on my own after a couple of years and started my first agency.
Wow.
So that sort of was how I got going. I think I borrowed £10,000 from my dad, who frankly may or may not have had it, depending on the day. But that day he had it. So I borrowed some money from him, which I repaid. And the great thing about the agency business is you can start it with very little resource. You just need a computer and a phone, really.
And was that scary for you to start your business with a loan from your dad?
I think that at the time, when you're in your 20s, what was I, like 25? I think you're so unaware of what could possibly go wrong. So, I just looking back, how anyone gave us any business, I have no idea. And of course, your family is totally useless. My mother still doesn't know what I do. I love her very much, but she, is still, what are you doing again, darling? So, but the people around, that you build relationships with, mentors, they all kind of come into play. So I think I remember having a meeting with an accountant, and he said, I'll be amazed if you're in business after a year.
Wow.
But, I don't think I realized the consequences.
I just have to add a little personal tidbit to that. Having been born in Portugal, and in Portugal, there's only a handful of occupations that really are commonly discussed beyond kind of basic jobs, and that's lawyer, doctor, etc. So given that I was in the entertainment business, my mother could never really explain to people what I did because I was developing TV shows, and that was just foreign to them. So she just resorted to telling everybody that I was a doctor, and I never understood when I would walk the streets. They would be like, Doutora Fernanda, I was like, why does everyone think I'm a doctor? So that's just so funny.
Amazing.
So let's talk a little bit about so you started your business. It obviously took off and grew because you stayed in the entrepreneurial kind of life for a long time. And then how did you transition from the marketing area to your current business?
So around about 5 years ago, I had moved to the US to really grow our agency business here. And agency businesses are wonderful, but they are so people-oriented. And I had a bit of an intervention. I became unwell, and I had to come out of the business for a little time. And when I returned, I sort of had a different relationship to it. I can't really explain, not in a negative way, but by this time the company was 200 people. It's a well-oiled machine and it's running. And, I think what you learn about yourself is what you're, better at and not so good at. And, what I probably really learned through that period was I'm a horrible manager. I never finish anything. But if you want something started, I'm your person, And so I found myself in financial meetings and this and that. And, it was just not really, I was, I'm passionate about practicing communications and brand marketing, but I really fell out of love with running the company at that time. Mm-hmm. And we sold it, and it did not go well. My first exit was a complete a lesson in exiting.
Really?
Which happens, and the more people you speak to, the more and that is an experience to share another time. But we sold the company, and you lose control at that point, and so we were not aligned with our new partners ultimately, and so I left, and so I ended up in my non-compete, so I couldn't start another agency. And my husband and I had invested in a marijuana company. A couple of friends were setting up back in 2018. And my husband, who was in the restaurant business and the music industry, was just like, this is the industry. He was just so excited about it. We went to a dispensary in LA. I had never taken any drugs, so this was a whole new world. And it was just sort of, you could feel the energy, around the business. And so what was amazing about my exit kind of going wrong, I guess, is, when a company is 200 people, it's very hard to change it or move it around or, whereas we suddenly had this time period in our lives where we could start something new. And so we started oHHo with James's best friend Tim, who's in the UK.
And so tell us about oHHo.
So James and Tim went on a, car adventure across America looking for this, ideal in their mind, sun-grown, beautiful hemp plants. And what they found were, very large operators. The Farm Bill had recently come in, not really great farming practices, a lot of rubbish in the market, and we would call it snake oil, pricing structures all over the place, complicated, people charging you $200 for something that's got 20 milligrams of CBD in it. It was really unsophisticated. And the generation, I think, in their 40s and 50s with a lot of, business experience was, I think, quite afraid and skeptical of the industry. And that's changing, but very slowly. And so it was really full of chances and, a lot of people who were, getting high, which is fine, obviously, but it's not, it was not run, it did not run properly as a business. So, they really felt strongly about having, sustainable products, clean products that were fully transparent. Where were the growers that had come from the marijuana space that really knew how to grow these plants and extract them in the right way? And so we set off on our search for those farms and those farmers, and slowly we found our first farm in upstate New York and one in Colorado. And we noticed this idea of terroir, like wine or cheese, depending on where it's grown. There are different appellations. And so we started creating oils with independent growers and farmers. And what we, our mission is to kind of build this, fantastic network of grown in America, farmers, and bring their products to market, but to a certain standard that the consumer can really connect with and understand.
Interesting. So can you repeat that again? Did you say terroir?
Oh, terroir. It's a French, so Terroir. It's like, how do you say? It'll be my English accent. So just the
high fashion pret-a-porter, or however it's pronounced.
Right. Just where, where grapes are grown, it creates a completely different product, and no single plant is the same. So I used to work on for LVMH and Krug, and that the Krug vintage is a blend, and so they're blending different vintages from different years, and so it never tastes the same, and so the sense that people were applying just this, put CBD in everything and give it to your dog, felt like it was a little bit more sophisticated than that, perhaps.
So so if I understand you correctly, you're developing your CBD oils, specifically in this case, almost like fine wines from different regions of the country.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That's pretty unique, no? For your industry?
I think, I think there are certain, smaller growers who really, certainly hold the same values, but I don't think anyone's really tackling it at a brand level in the way that we are. And like wine, sometimes when it's very good, it runs out, and then another year you might not get the same crop. And so you need the flexibility and the consumer understanding to be able to explain that. And so we came across that idea, if we just didn't want to go to a big manufacturer and, buy a bunch of plants. We wanted to really, look at how we could support consumers, how we could support, farmers, how we could support communities, because hemp growing is a really wonderful regenerative opportunity for farming communities. And so there's been a lot of struggle where farmers have grown hemp, great hemp, and it's gone to